Hey guys, it's Chris. From the strangest looking fish ever to be dragged out of the water to a man who hooked a dangerous monster and then dragged it to his house, here are 10 of the strangest things ever caught. Number 10. Long-nosed chimera. Out of all the strange animals caught while fishing, the long-nosed chimera is one of the weirdest. In a report from CBC News, a fisherman discussed the fright of a lifetime when he hauled in the strangest creature he had ever seen. This happened in Canada, in a small town in Newfoundland. A man named Gary Goodyear had been fishing with his nets down about 460 fathoms, or about 2,600 feet in a normal measurement, and then he hauled up the freakiest fish in existence. To be quite honest, this fish does not look like something that should even really exist. It was roughly 3 feet long, and at first Gary thought it was a platypus. And yes, you can kinda see the resemblance. The long-nosed chimera does have an extremely long nose that could be mistaken for the snout of a platypus. It almost looks like an overgrowth of cartilage sticking out of its face. Even though Gary was an experienced fisherman surrounded by other experienced fishermen on a boat, none of them could figure out what the animal was. In fact, even after Gary took the monster into the wharf, not a single professional fisherman around could identify the creature. It wasn't until Gary uploaded the photos on social media that somebody finally came forward and told him what he'd found. And Gary was terrified to find out that the long-nosed chimera is actually really venomous. It has a spine loaded with venom that can do some serious damage to a human being. Luckily, no one had been hurt while handling the dead animal, and going forward, Gary's probably going to be a little more careful when he reels in monstrous animals from the deep ocean. To date, this is one of the only long-nosed chimera ever captured by humans. Number 9. The strangest fish. One of the strangest fish you will ever see was captured by a Russian fisherman. Apparently, this guy had been sharing pictures of his catches because they look like they belong in science fiction movies. Some of the fish he's caught have been so rare that no one has ever seen them before, and this has brought a lot of allegations against him for faking some of these really weird-looking fish. But worse than that, some people have been claiming that this Russian guy has been catching some of the rarest and most endangered fish in the world and then killing them for the sake of entertaining his social media followers. This is obviously not a great thing to do, but it's also just conjecture. According to a story by The Sun, the Russian fisherman works on a trawler ship and frequently encounters all kinds of weird monster fish. And yeah, some of them don't look like they belong anywhere on this planet. He's found some toadfish, some wolffish, and a giant sunfish that looks like it belongs on the moon. Some of the weirder things he's shared on his Instagram look like demons dredged up from the lowest pits of the underworld. Apparently, this Russian fisherman went to Marine University and has an expert knowledge on processing and preparing fish, and he's actually been trying to educate the public about bizarre sea life through the pictures he posts on social media. However, he has been showing some of the most horrifying beasts in the world, and anyone paying attention probably doesn't want to go in the water any longer. So what's the most disturbing fish you've ever seen? Was it a toothy salmon that seemed to peer at you from a frozen display case in a supermarket? Or was it a weird tentacled squid that washed up on the beach and scared you off? Let me know your strangest seafood encounters in the comments below. Then be sure to subscribe to World List if you haven't already, because we've got more exciting videos coming out all the time. Number 8. 2-for-1 combo. This next story is not really about strange fish. Nonetheless, it's one of the weirdest things ever caught. When a Texas man went fishing one summer in the bayou with a group of friends in the Louisiana and Houston region, he'd never expected to reel in a fish in the middle of still being eaten by a snake. In the photographs he posted online, he appears to be fishing beneath an overpass on the side of a river, and you can very clearly see that the innocent fish he caught was being feasted on by a snake. However, if you look closely at the photos, you can see he didn't actually hook the fish, he hooked the snake. The fish appears to be some sort of catfish, but it's not clear what sort of snake is eating it. It doesn't look like an anaconda or a python, but then again, it really could be. No one was 100% sure. In any case, the guy apparently separated the fish and the snake and tossed them both back into the water and then kept on fishing. I can tell you right now that if this happened to me, the fish, the snake, the fishing rod all would have been tossed into the river, and that would have been the end of the whole fishing trip. Number 7. Pigeonfish. In China, a fisherman has found perhaps the most unrealistic fish ever. First of all, the fish was supposed to be a common freshwater grass carp. However, this fish was clearly a mutant. From the footage posted online, you can clearly see that the carp had a head that looked like that of a pigeon. It looked like a creature with the body of a fish and the head of a pigeon. It was caught in Guiyang City in the south of China back in 2018, and it was a huge shock to all of those present. In the video posted, the pigeonfish is gasping for air, while onlookers are freaking out and scrambling to take pictures with their phones. Luckily, the man who caught the fish took sympathy on it and then released it back into the ocean after everyone got their snapshot, of course. This is definitely the only time that a pigeonfish has ever been captured, but it's far from the only creepy thing ever pulled out of the water in China. In fact, just recently, there have been at least 30 new deep-sea creatures discovered using an underwater drone. And among these new critters was a ratfish with giant ears. Whether some kind of chemical spill had anything to do with the mutation of this pigeonfish, well, we'll never really know for sure. Number 6. Mutant wolffish. Let's take a look at another mutant fish. In Japan, a fisherman pulled a monstrous wolffish out of the ocean that is believed to have been affected by the Fukushima nuclear disaster. This happened in the waters between the Japanese island of Hokkaido and the Russian coast, and it's almost too unbelievable to be true. Wolffish normally only grow to be about 4 feet, according to Metro News, but the one caught in Japan was roughly 6 feet. That makes it 2 feet longer than any ordinary wolffish, and definitely a mutant. Reports claim that it likely mutated because of all the nuclear waste that leaked out of the Fukushima nuclear power plant after the devastating 2011 tsunami that struck Japan. As for what happened to the fish after it was caught, there isn't really much information about that, but it's unlikely that anyone would want to eat a fish that had been mutated by nuclear waste. The thing looks so heavy in the photographs that the guy can barely hold it up. Hopefully, the Japanese fisherman threw it back into the ocean and let it live out the rest of its mutant days in peace. On the other hand, maybe that wouldn't have been such a good idea. The last thing we want is a mutant fish giving birth to more mutant fish. Number 5. Double-mouthed fish. In 2019, a woman from New York caught an extremely strange fish that appears to have 2 mouths. This happened on Lake Champlain on the New York-Vermont border, and the amazing catch was uploaded online by a local fishing team who had been with the woman when she reeled it in. Once the pictures went viral, people were understandably freaked out. Many people were wondering just how a fish with 2 mouths could even exist. But it turned out that this wasn't such a freaky incident after all. The fish was not a mutant, and apparently it wasn't even the only example of a fish with 2 mouths that was recently caught. The first thing that's important to know is that the fish was just an ordinary trout. The second important thing to know is that the fish probably had sustained some sort of injury. What probably happened is that the trout had an accident with its mouth, and the injury split the membranes between its lower jawbone and the bottom of its mouth. So rather than it being a double-mouthed fish, its mouth was just lower than it should have been. The bottom of its mouth was hanging down just below its jaws, giving it the appearance of having 2 mouths. Number 4. Duck in the ice. Ice fishing is not a hobby for everyone. Not just any person has the patience or the endurance to stand on a piece of ice and wait to catch a fish through a tiny hole. Imagine how annoying it would be after waiting for hours to catch something only to pull a bird through the hole instead of a fish. That's exactly what happened when a group of friends were fishing in Pennsylvania. The guy was standing on the ice with his rod. He felt a snag, and instead of pulling out a fish from the ice, he pulled out a duck. Obviously, this is completely ridiculous. What on earth was the duck doing underneath the ice in the first place? How could it possibly have survived the freezing temperatures? And even more importantly, how could it have been breathing? Well, in the news report from USA Today, they didn't give us any information on how the duck could possibly have stayed alive. However, they did tell us that it was a red-breasted merganser duck and that they're extremely common in Pennsylvania. Sometimes they stay underwater to look for food, and this one must have just gotten itself trapped. But not to worry, the fisherman did release the bird after getting the hook out of it, and everyone involved watched the bird fly away and go back to its life. Number 3. A lawnmower. Everyone has heard the story of a fisherman catching a boot instead of a fish. It's an anecdote as old as footwear itself. Ever since boots have been around, there have been fishermen pulling them out of the water. But this next story is not about a boot. It's even weirder than that. A man named Alex from Australia was having a fine day fishing when he hooked a whopper. He was understandably excited considering the weight suddenly yanking on the fishing rod, nearly pulling him into the water. After an extremely brutal struggle in which Alex was under the assumption he was reeling in an octopus or maybe even a shark, he instead pulled from the water an old lawnmower. Imagine the kind of disappointment from pulling a lawnmower out of the water instead of a giant fish. The interesting thing about this is that obviously if you care about the ocean, you don't want to throw an old lawnmower back in. There's no catch and release with yard equipment, so Alex hauled the lawnmower onto his boat and took it back to the marina. There were some jokes made about gardening in Atlantis, and at the end of the day, the lawnmower was disposed of properly. According to Alex himself, the lawnmower was indeed the strangest thing he had ever caught in all his years of fishing. Number 2, the swallowtail. It's honestly pretty hard to give the title of strangest fish ever caught to one particular fish. There are billions of these things in the ocean, and thousands of tales of extremely weird fish being caught by unsuspecting fishermen. But we're gonna try to do it anyways. I hereby declare the strangest fish ever caught to be a giant orange and yellow swallowtail. This magnificent creature was caught in Kenya by a man named Steve, and it might be the biggest one ever reeled in. The swallowtail looks essentially like a goldfish, except it's several times larger. It's yellow and orange, and brighter than any goldfish you might have in your aquarium. According to the master fisherman that caught it, the swallowtail was the most improbable thing he has ever caught. Even though he managed to reel in some smaller ones afterwards, the giant swallowtail was definitely an anomaly. Steve even gave the fish its own Facebook account. Number 1, hungry crocodile. It's not easy to catch a saltwater crocodile while fishing, but sometimes it does happen. Just recently in 2020, a man caught a croc and decided to take it home with him. He'd been fishing in his boat in the north of Australia when he accidentally captured a giant saltwater crocodile on the end of his line. But whereas a normal fisherman might throw the crocodile back into the water, this guy decided it would be a good idea to restrain the animal inside of his boat and then drag it home with him. Once he got home, he contacted the Department of Environment and Science and told them of his story. The proper authorities then came and took the crocodile away and gave it to a zoo before they commenced an investigation about the incident. The man actually got in quite a bit of trouble over this. In Australia, you're not supposed to approach a crocodile while fishing, or indeed really at any time. The croc was at least 5 feet long and could have done some serious damage to the guy, or even to somebody else. Hopefully he learned his lesson and won't be bringing any more crocodiles home. Which of these strange fish would you love to take a bite out of? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. Be sure to come back soon for another awesome video, and don't forget to hit subscribe before you leave.